Joining us now is CAF's resident historian, Brad Pilgrim, also a Hall of Fame member. Congratulations again on that.
Thank
Brad, going to get a little background on the very first airplane to join the CAF fleet, and that is P-51 Rednose.
Yeah. It started out with Lloyd Nolan, as I've covered in the history stories before. Lloyd Nolan, during the war, was an instructor pilot stationed stateside because of bad eyesight. He always wanted to be a fighter pilot, like most people did back then. And after the war, he bought a P-40 in 1951, and he flew that around for a little while, but he really, really wanted a Mustang. And so he sold the P-40 and intended to flip that money into a Mustang. But right about the time he was doing that, the military started recalling all the Mustangs that were being surplused in order to send them to Korea. And so he kind of just lost out. He was out of a P-40 and no available Mustangs. And in 1957, there came one available over in San Antonio. They found it for $2,500. And he didn't have the money to buy it. That was, nearly twice what he had paid for his P-40, and he said he just couldn't afford it. So he got a couple of his crop dusting and farming buddies, him, Billy Turnbull, Billy Dre, Royce Norman, and C.W. Butler. They all went in together and bought this airplane for $2,500, and it did include some spare parts. They thought it was a pretty good deal. And they bought the airplane and did some work to it. It had, I think it was rudder damage. It had been ran into or something there on the field, but nothing major. But I think the guy actually threw in an extra rudder or something. But they fixed the airplane and brought it down to Mercedes, and that was the official beginning of the then Confederate Air Force, because it hadn't been incorporated or anything. And one night, as the story goes, around this 1957 timeframe, they all went outside one morning to go fly the Mustang, and somebody had painted the word Confederate Air Force down the side of it as a joke about them rebelling against the government's policy of destroying all these airplanes, and the joke stuck. And that's where the name came from, and that's where the first CAF airplane came from. This is what they first looked like when they first got it. It was silver. They put the red on it. It was just bare metal. They put the red on it, and some of the pictures, and when it's in this scheme, the Kodachrome slides or whatever, they fade out, and the red sometimes looks fluorescent orange and looks very weird, but that was actually red wingtips, tail, and spinner. And then later on, they went to another paint scheme, which became what we called the CF house colors. You can see right there that orange color on the Bearcat tips and everything. That it was red. It's just faded out because of the Kodachrome slides of finishing rubber. It's neat to see the old crop dusters behind there. And that was one of the first Bearcats they bought. People remember they bought two Bearcats because somebody came along and said, yeah, the Mustang's great, but the Bearcat's a better airplane. So they bought a Bearcat so they could race them and find out. And that's when they really got going on collecting airplanes. So this is a very early picture. This is probably 1958 is probably when that picture is. And there it is. You can see the Confederate Air Force painted on the side of it there, and still the weird orange color because of the Kodachrome. But I'm sure that was repainted, because I'm sure the first time it was done probably under the influence of some liquid late in the evening. It was probably done with a paintbrush or a can of shoe polish or something. But this is how it appeared for a year or so until they went on to the new paint scheme.
Is there any record of why they decided the red nose, red tail, red tips?
No, my suspicion is that someone had a can of red paint.
Yeah.
I really think that's probably what it was, because so many things back then, because they didn't have a budget to do anything. Right. Like the gray uniforms that started out, people, well, why do they wear gray uniforms? It actually didn't have anything to do with the Confederacy. It had to do with the fact that a lot of these guys wore rental work clothes, working in crop dusters and as mechanics, and a lot of those rental work clothes were those gray polyester clothes that were, they still make them today for work uniforms and stuff like that. This is down there in Mercedes. You can see the building behind that. That was the second story of the building up there where they used to have parties and everything. But that's the first Bearcat and the Rednose Mustang with the strangely faded colors again. You can even tell the barrel behind it is faded out.
Yep.
So, but I swear it really was red. And this was the second iteration of it. You can see the Confederate Air Force has changed a little bit on the back, and then it's got the flag right in front of it. And then it's got the strap on the tail. And that's a pretty neat picture. That was in a lot of magazines when the CAF first became known. This was the picture that kind of was the first publicity shot for the CAF.
Do you remember what year this one is?
That's probably 1958. It's probably when that is. Late 57, very early 58 would be my guess. It looks like Lloyd Nolan flying it. This is the main color that people think of prior to the military paint job. This is what you call CF house colors. And most of the airplanes we had were some version of red, white, and blue. And this is another one that I suspect was done. The Thunderbirds flew around in red, white, and blue paint schemes. And whenever they started doing air shows with the CF airplanes, I think the thought was we need to look like an air show team and need to, look a little more professional or whatever. So people didn't paint warbirds in military colors at that time. In fact, we didn't really start doing it until 1972 is when we really went whole hog into painting them. Paint's expensive, and to put on custom paint is really expensive, even back then. So this was the paint scheme that it flew around in for several years. You see the large N number down the side of the fuselage, something nobody would do today. That's marked like a civilian airplane, and you wouldn't do that today unless you had a true civilian airplane.
Right. Nice crop duster in the background as well.
Yeah, that's a Stearman sitting back there. I'd look that N number up someday and see whose Stearman that is, if it's still around. At least the red's not faded out here.
Yep, there you go. Yeah, or faded out on the mobile gas truck.
That's true. That's true.
Old logo on there too.
Yeah.
Is this Mercedes as well?
I don't know where that's at. I've had this slide. I got this slide probably 10 years ago. I think I bought it off of eBay, and it didn't have. There's about 20 different slides over the years of different airplanes, and only a few were CAF, and that just happened to be in there. But I don't. It looks flat. Could be West Texas. Who knows?
It could be.
Yeah. This is another publicity photo, and you see it's a little bit different iteration of the paint scheme. It has some of the sponsors' names under the window up there, and it has the flag on the tail fin, but it's in formation with the Bearcat. And this was another publicity photo that I don't know. My suspicion is Purnell photographers down in Harlingen took this picture. Jack Purnell was a local photographer there, and he did a lot of work for the CAF, a lot of volunteer work and free pictures and stuff like that. And he took the majority of the early days pictures that I've ever found. And so I suspect he took this one, but this one wound up, they sold it at air shows and stuff like that. And at the little gift shop they had, this is one of the press photos that they passed out as well. So there's about 6 photos in this series that had other different CF airplanes in it as well, different sides of the Mustang. And I also have Super 8 video footage that was filmed from a T6 of this very formation with the airplanes trying to stay in formation with the T6, but that film's not in the greatest shape. This is down in Harlingen. When they first moved there, you see the P-40 back there. It's the same P-40 we have today. It was red back then, bright red, and you can see the Mustang still basically in the same scheme it was earlier. But this is, I forgot what year we bought the P-40, but this is probably 1962, 63, I would have to guess. I'm not certain when we bought the P-40. I should know that, but I don't. This is the first military paint scheme, and I think this was probably chosen because they already called the plane Rednose because of the red paint that they had on it, and they probably, as they did back in those days, probably found a picture of it in a magazine or a book somewhere and went, oh, that's neat, and painted it. I think it's the fourth fighter group. Yeah, 4th Fighter Group paint, loosely based. It's not done right in that as far as an authentic paint scheme. But and see, it's still got the big N number up on the tail and everything like that. But that was the first military scheme, and I think this picture is 1972. Looking at the airplanes in the background that are in military paint, I think this is probably 72 at the earliest. This is later on when it was repainted. This is after went to the Air Base Georgia in 2002, I believe it was, and the airplane was restored over a couple of years. Prior to about 1993, the airplane had never really been restored. It had just been flown, changed engines, fly it some more. It was pretty long in the tooth, and they went through and did a lot of work to it and put a second set of controls. It's not a full TF-51, but it had the ability to have a second set of controls to check out fighter pilots in it. And that's when it got a freshening and up and everything. And then it went to Air Base Georgia in 2002, and they've maintained it ever since then.
And it's amazing, through all of these pictures, it still has the same N number.
It does, yeah. N numbers don't tend to change very often unless it's a vanity thing. And I don't mean vanity in a bad way, but like, the Thunderbolt the CF's N model Thunderbolt for years was November 47 Tango Bravo,
Yep.
until we got That's All Brothers C-47, and they decided they needed 47 Tango Bravo. And so the Thunderbolt, after a lifetime of having an N number, now that N number has been given to another airplane for vanity reasons. I didn't agree with that, but nobody asked me either. So,
Where is this picture taken?
that is at Military Aviation Museum out in Virginia Beach. That's
Okay.
The museum started by Jerry Yeagan and currently ran by our friend and fellow CF member Keegan Chetwin.
Yeah. And have you
Very
got a
nice
year on
museum.
this? Yeah, a year on this one?
No, I don't know what year that one is. I'm not really sure. It's
Okay.
hard to say. After a while, it never changed a whole lot.
Right.
You know,
It's probably
got the
later on.
tramp stamp.
It has the CAF wings on it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a relatively recent picture.
Yeah. Oh, I'd say within the last 10 or 12 years, probably. Yeah.
So Brad, any final thoughts or insights into the very first airplane to join the CAF fleet?
You know what? This airplane, as I've said before, Ed Maloney out in Chino had bought a Mustang before us,
Mhm.
but not very long before us. He never really intended to have a flying museum, or I don't think he thought it was a possibility at the time. So he bought it for a museum piece. Lloyd and those guys bought this airplane for the purpose of starting a flying museum. Well, they bought it to go have a good time, but
Yep.
that is what, morphed into this idea of we can educate people about this and save more airplanes. So this very airplane was the impetus for starting what we are today of gathering up 180 airplanes, and it started with this one right here. And I think it's pretty cool that we've still got it after all these years. And
Yeah.
the markings are a little different. I wish it was back the way it was in '72, just for I like that look. But to basically look like the same airplane, and people know when they see that airplane, they know it's the CAF's. It's synonymous with this organization. And the Air Base Georgia people take really good care of it. A lot of really neat people have flown this airplane over the year. Chuck Yeager flew this airplane. Bob Hoover flew this airplane. Ronnie Gardner, Rick Shark. The list of sponsors on this airplane over the years is amazing. And the guys that fly it and maintain it today at Air Base Georgia really do a great job with it. I'm just thrilled that it's still around and still operating and still carrying the CAF banner.
Of course, Brad is the keeper of all things the CAF. I'm sure you have probably quite a bit of information that goes back in the files on this airplane.
Yeah, while getting ready to do this webinar the other day, I was looking for something else the other night, digging through my filing cabinets, and this right here, these folders, this is how much stuff I have just on Rednose alone, included in here. And I haven't even looked through most of this stuff. I haven't looked through all of it. There's the original list of all the spare parts that came with the airplane, and personal correspondence between the original 5 guys that owned it and buying each other out and everything like that. It's pretty cool, some of the stuff I have. It still just amazes me, some of the stuff I find from time to time.
Famous last words. While looking for something else,
That's
I found
exactly
this.
what I was doing. I literally was looking for something else.
Well, Brad, any final thoughts on Rednose?
No, I mean, it's like I say, it's just it carried the flag of the CAF since 1957, and is probably not the most well-known or most famous P-51 in existence, but people know who owns it when they see it, and it really was one of the very first Warbird Mustangs, and it is literally the airplane that started this organization. If Lloyd Nolan hadn't thought of it, somebody else would have, but Lloyd Nolan's foresight of getting 5 guys together to buy this airplane is basically what started this hobby that we're also lucky to participate in on various levels.
Indeed. Well, Brad, we will check in with you again, especially if you find something else that you weren't looking for when you were looking for something else.
Someday I'm going to find what I'm looking for, and everyone, it's going to be amazing.
It will be. Brad, thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Steve. Thank you.